The Minnesota Vikings are approaching, its date of recording is May 19th right now. And there is moves that they should have made so far that they have to make now, and moves that they should make going forward. We are going to cover 5 moves that I picked out for the Minnesota Vikings, not potential moves that they can make, but moves that the Minnesota Vikings have to make this offseason. It shouldn't be a question about these 5 decisions. We should all be in agreement here. And that starts with one that the Minnesota Vikings should have made already, should have done already, and that is extending right tackle Brian O'Neill. The Vikings this offseason have improved a lot at the offensive line. Now, yes, going into the draft, not really. They did move on from Riley Reef. They did bring back Rashad Hill. That was a good move. They have not brought back Brett Jones, though, which is another weird thing. But in the draft, the Vikings drafting Christian Darrisaw and Wyatt Davis, 2 potential starters on the offensive line. Hopefully, Wyatt Davis can take the offensive line starting role. But one thing about the Minnesota Vikings, they're not good at drafting offensive linemen. And that's just something that we've seen a long track record. There is one offensive lineman out of the last decade that the Vikings have drafted that has been worth the pick, and that is right tackle Brian O'Neill. And the Vikings have yet to re-sign him. He is on his rookie contract. He is an unrestricted free agent in 2022, this upcoming offseason. And yes, he has suffered with injuries, but there is no doubt that the Vikings should bring him back. He was the best player on the Vikings offensive line last year, and that's not saying a lot, considering our offensive line allowed far too many pressures, especially on the interior side of the line. Our 2018 draft pick in the second round, Vikings drafted Brian O'Neill but with a 62nd overall pick. This upcoming season, Brian O'Neill would be 26 years old and is expected to be an unrestricted free agent in 2022. Now, yes, Vikings have decisions, and they're obviously working on it right now, but there's no reason why the Vikings shouldn't have made this decision. This is a no-brainer for the Minnesota Vikings, as he is the best player on our offensive line and the only good player the Vikings drafted out of the last decade. He played 1,070 snaps in 2020, where he had 8 penalties and 3 sacks. Now, when you look at that, it's not the best, but he did have a 78 PFF grade and blocked very good for Dalvin Cook. He was a great blocker. He is strong. This guy is big. He can play right tackle. And I'm glad the Vikings did actually draft Christian Darrisaw to keep Brian O'Neill at right tackle, because he's done a great job there, and he is injury prone. So having him at left tackle is a bit of a question mark. But again, the Vikings should sign Brian O'Neill through 2025. To be an unrestricted free agent in 2026. That is very comfortable. Now, yes, he has suffered with injuries, but this is very comfortable. He's 26 years old. Lock him down for the long haul. Keep him here. He is the best draft pick out of the 2018 draft class. And Tyler Conklin was drafted in the 5th round, and re-signing him is another possibility. But this is what the Vikings have to do, is extend Brian O'Neill. This is a no-brainer, one of the moves that they have to make, with 2 years of that being guaranteed money. You shouldn't have a fully guaranteed contract. Obviously, it's an offensive lineman, so there's not really a reason why you would have a fully guaranteed contract. But 2 years loaded with incentives and bonuses, this is what the Vikings should do with the Brian O'Neill decision. Next up, we have another extension, Vikings extending Harrison Smith. Now, this is more of a questionable move, because obviously Harrison Smith is old. He is 32 years old, will be this upcoming season. The 2012 draft pick, Minnesota Vikings drafted him 29th overall. Excellent draft pick. Harrison Smith has been a top 5 safety throughout his entire career. Well, overall, right now, I wouldn't say Harrison Smith is a top 5 safety anymore. And that's not because he's taken a decline since then. That's simply because there is a lot of excellent safeties out there. So I would put him somewhere around top 10, though, but he is very healthy. He played 16 games in 2020, where he was the core player on this Vikings defense, the only player alongside Eric Wilson. Now, Eric Kendricks did get injured, but him and Eric Wilson were basically the only players in this defense last year. Anthony Harris was non-existent. Our corners were rookies. Our starting corners were all rookies or injured. Our linebackers were all injured. Defensive line, we're a bunch of backups. That's why we're not going into any of this defensive line again. This upcoming defensive line is going to be a different story, though. I'm excited for that. But he led the team with 5 interceptions, 89 total tackles, had a 74.5 PFF grade in 2020, and was the best player on this Vikings defense, and possibly the only player alongside Eric Wilson on this Vikings defense. The Vikings should give him a 2-year extension through 2023 to be an unrestricted free agent in 2024 with $12 million average annual salary. Now, people will argue that Vikings should not re-sign Harrison Smith because he is 32, or extend Harrison Smith because of the uncertainty they have going into their future, because they are aging players. However, we have seen no decline from Harrison Smith thus far. He has stayed healthy. In fact, I have reasons why the Vikings should re-sign him and why it should be a question at all why the Vikings should re-sign him. He's always healthy. No sign of decline at all. He's a top 7 safety. He's a team captain. And then he's a longtime veteran for this Vikings defense. He's been here for a long time and is the only one of 2 players on this Vikings defense that's 30 or up, alongside Patrick Peterson, who the Vikings just brought in on a 1-year deal. And I wouldn't expect him to be here for much longer after that. And then another reason is Vikings have a huge question mark at safety. Not extending Harrison Smith will only make that worse. We have Xavier Rhodes on a 1-year contract. We don't know, or Xavier Woods, sorry, on a 1-year contract. We don't know what's going to happen with him. Outside of that, we have Miles Dorn, Josh Metellus. Like, we haven't seen enough from these guys to say that they're ready. Next up, we have a special teams shakeup around the board. There was a few reasons why the Vikings lacked success last season. Obviously, the biggest one was defense. Well, Vikings focused on that this entire offseason with all of their money and draft picks. Vikings completely focused on defense. The other one was offensive line. Vikings allowed far too many pressures on the interior side of the line. They did a great job blocking for Dalvin Cook, though. You have to give them props for that. But protecting for Kirk Cousins, I mean, he needs the pocket time. He needs his feet planted when he throws. And they did not do a good job on that. Well, Vikings focused on that in the draft when drafting Christian Darrisaw and Wyatt Davis. There's one other reason why the Vikings lacked success last year, and that was the special teams. At kicker, at special teams return game, even at punting. The Vikings made the right move by firing Marwan Mayoff. They promoted Ryan Ficken, and they brought in Robert Steeples to work alongside him. So we have a whole new shakeup on special teams right now, and there's a lot going on. Right now, we have our kicker, so Dan Bailey was cut from the team, and we have Greg Joseph and Riley Patterson who are just going to play for this. The Vikings are finally doing the kicker role correctly. You do not draft kickers. Vikings have drafted, 2 kickers of recent memory, and both of them didn't play more than 6 games with the team. So you don't draft kickers. I'm not a fan of that. You take all of the undrafted kickers, make them go against each other, put a lot of pressure on them. You don't want the kicker's role to be locked down. You want them to have pressure. That's the reason why they're a kicker in the NFL. You take all the undrafted guys, you let them work out, and whatever one performs the best under pressure, who are playing for their jobs, deserves that job. Because kicking is a mind game, and this is the right way to do it, and the Vikings are finally doing it correctly instead of drafting another kicker. Right now, we have Greg Joseph and Riley Patterson, and I believe there will be more kickers practicing for the Minnesota Vikings and trying to make the team. And then the special teams return game, punt and kick returner. I put Hunger Games here because these players are playing not only for the special teams return game, but their job in general. These players are going against each other. Now, the Vikings did lose Mike Hughes after trading him, so now we have KJ Osborne there. We have Kene Nwanu, a draft pick, Amir Smith-Marseille, another draft pick, and then Amir Abdullah. So there's 4 players who are playing for the special teams return role right now, and there's going to be a huge shakeup here, and I'm excited to see this happen because last year, you can see in this picture, KJ Osborne, the only memorable moment from him as a kick returner was him fumbling. That was the only part of his kick return game that I remember. I don't think he's going to make the active roster this upcoming season because of that. I don't believe he should be our special teams returner. The only reason why he would be is if these other guys are not good enough. And I want to see Kene take that kick return role. I want to see Amir Smith-Marseille take that punt return role. It'll be nice just not having to have Amir Abdullah and KJ Osborne on the roster this upcoming season. And then after the Minnesota Vikings make these moves, extending Harrison Smith and extending Brian O'Neill should be no-brainers. You could also put in Tyler Conklin there because he's another player who is going to be the tight end 2, who's earned his role as a tight end 2. You could extend him too. You have some leftover money though. Assuming, obviously, you cut some of these players, you will have some leftover money. How do you use that money wisely? We need offensive line depth. Not just offensive line depth. We need veteran offensive linemen. Assuming Wyatt Davis does take Dakota Dozier's role as a starting right guard, the entire offensive line will be on the rookie contracts. Now, Brian O'Neill should get extended, so I guess he would be out of it. But as of right now, they're all on the rookie contracts. If Wyatt Davis takes Dakota Dozier's role and he's as good as we're hoping him to be. So the Vikings should use their extra money to bring in offensive line depth, veteran offensive line depth, because the only veterans we have as offensive linemen would be Rashad Hill and would be Dakota Dozier, who are not on the rookie contracts. And for that reason, I have some additions that the Vikings could bring in. That would be Try Turner, Nick Easton, bringing him back with the Minnesota Vikings. He was with the Vikings earlier. Bringing back Brett Jones. Obviously, this is another move the Vikings should have made already. Or Joe Dahl. There's other players the Vikings can get. Whoever is left over who's cheap that you can have as a backup would be great for the Minnesota Vikings, because I don't want to see any more of Drew Samia playing. He should be gone. Dakota Dozier, you can keep him as a backup for 1 year. I don't want to see any more of, or well, you have some other guys. You have Zach something, this free agent who's going to be on the practice squad for sure. And then you have Kyle Hinton, another draft pick. But still, you need veteran offensive linemen to have as backups, to have as placements for these starters, because some of these starters do suffer with injuries. Now, it's not as much as other teams from what you see at the offensive line, but these players do suffer with injuries, and it's why you should have veteran on the offensive line, even if they're not starting, have them as backups, because right now we do not have enough depth at the offensive line position. And bringing back Nick Easton would be pretty fun too, to see him back. Same with Brett Jones. And then finally, the last step, the last move, wide receiver depth. Specifically that wide receiver 6 and practice squad role and practice squad wide receivers is where the Vikings have to look at this. And I'm happy how the Vikings handled wide receivers. They didn't take wide receivers in the free agency. They didn't blow their money on that. They specifically focused on defense in the free agency and didn't really sign any wide receivers, which they could have got, like Curtis Samuel, or they could have got Keelan Cole. They could have got him too. So there was a couple players that the Vikings could have got that I would have liked to see happen, but they didn't use money on the wide receiver position, which was very good because we have our starters. We have our core players that is in Justin Jefferson, in Adam Thielen, and then BC and BB can play as from a slot wide receiver or as an outside wide receiver replacement. So, but the thing is, Chad Beebe and Adam Thielen, 2 starters for the Minnesota Vikings, both are injury prone, especially Chad Beebe, who suffered with injuries every season so far. So when Chad Beebe and Adam Thielen go injured, who do we have? We need those backups. So we have our wide receivers 1 through 5 already. Outside of that wide receiver 6 role, all of these wide receivers are playing for that right now. And the practice squad receivers, because it is vital, especially if the Vikings suffer with injuries. We need depth at the wide receiver position. And the Vikings have done it right, because right now we have 5 wide receivers who are playing for that wide receiver 6 role. That is Dan Chisena, KJ Osborne, Watt Pyler, who I'm very excited for him, Blake Proehl, and Myron Mitchell. Those last 3 I named were all undrafted free agents, and the first 2 I named were with the Vikings on the active roster last year, who both didn't have a great season. Now, Dan Chisena, he did make a splash on special teams. KJ Osborne, again, he didn't play very many reps, but as a punt and kick returner, did not have a good season. So let me know what y'all think. What are other decisions that the Vikings have to make this upcoming, or the rest of this offseason, where obviously the Vikings have to extend Brian O'Neill. That is a no-brainer. And they have to extend Harrison Smith. After that, you'll have a little bit of cap space, a little bit of cap room left where you can bring in some of these players. Where do you focus on? But anyways, let me know what y'all think. How do you believe this rest of this offseason should go, and how do you think it will go? Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Morning Kickoff. Have a great day.